And so it's really worthwhile working on this. Because once our minds begin to settle down a bit and our attention is very clear and focused, then whatever we turn our attention to, the mind, as I say, will penetrate it. If our attention is very scattered and not very centered, then whatever we turn our attention to, it will be very weak. Do you understand? I mean, it is a very important point, because people are very ambitious. And they hear about all these exciting meditations, and they think, yes, I want to do that, that sounds really fun. But because they don't have a foundation in learning how to really concentrate, the results are very iffy. It doesn't have any power. So therefore, in the Tibetan tradition, traditionally, they spent a lot of time working on getting their mind into a state of samadhi or shamatha meditation, so that when they then did anything else, the results would be like that. Do you understand? You see, otherwise what happens is that when we meditate, I mean, for example, in the Tibetan tradition, there are all these visualizations, and it can become very complicated. But when we're meditating, if our mind is not single-pointed, then we're doing the visualizations, or we're doing any kind of meditation that we're doing, loving-kindness meditation, or any kind of meditation. And there's the person meditating and the object of meditation. And there's sort of like, you know, I don't know, like two mountains facing each other. But they're not merged. I am meditating on this. This is my object of meditation. And so the meditation is there, and the person meditating is here, and they don't come together. And so it's all up in the head. And it doesn't have any, it doesn't bring results. But if our minds are really centered, so that when we do a practice, we become the practice, our mind and the practice completely merge, then that meditation goes from the head straight down to the center of our being. It goes here. And we become the meditation. And then, really very quickly, whatever we practice, the results are there, because we are one with what we're doing. And this is why these simple meditations are so vital. If we spend, it's like, you know, right now we're building our monastery, our nunnery in India, and the first year or two we just spent digging the foundations. We dug very deep and very good foundations and put in all the plumbing and so forth. And it took a lot of money and a lot of effort and a lot of time, and it wasn't in the least bit romantic and exotic. People don't come and say, oh, what gorgeous foundations! Wow, who's your architect? Foundations are not very exciting, but if you don't have good foundations, then even though you build up very fancy walls and you have, you know, golden roofs, it's very weak, and the building will soon begin to, you know, show signs of cracks and ill repair. You see this always in India. People build very shallow foundations, and then they build up very quickly the walls and the roof, but within a year or two it's beginning to look like a slum. And it's because they haven't made good, solid foundations. These houses here have good foundations. The damp doesn't rise, they don't crack. They stay for a long time. Look how strong it is. And so that's like our practice. If we have good foundations, really good, solid, deep foundations, then the rest of the building comes up in no time, and it will endure. So, therefore, even though it is not, as I say, very exotic or exciting to sit looking at the breath, especially with the inducements of the Tibetan practice, all sorts of exciting things to think about, it's really worthwhile giving attention to this. Because then once we know how to bring the mind into and merge with what we are doing, everything comes so easily. Everything else. But if we don't, then we will labor and do millions and millions of mantras, and at the end of it, so what? I mean, there's some result, but the result is very pale compared with what we could be accomplishing if we had some patience and worked hard first at getting our minds well tamed. It's like if you, I don't know, comes into my mind, I mean, if you have a horse that's wild, first you have to tame the horse, and then you can make him show jump. But first you have to tame him and make him willing to do everything else. Otherwise, with a wild horse, what can you do? So these exercises, which seem so simple and so boring, are very, very important, so that we become the masters of our mind instead of the slaves of our minds. And so our mind will naturally cooperate with us whatever we want to do with it. It's worthwhile taking the time for this. Now there are various objects for developing this practice. We talked here about the breath, but also, for example, in the Tibetan tradition, they often take a very simple object. When I first started doing this, my teacher gave me a little pebble. And you put it down, and you just concentrate on the pebble. It's good to have something which is not reflective, because that can hurt the eyes. And you just keep your eyes quietly on the pebble or some very simple object that you can't really think